Good morning. So we begin with a prayer first. Om no zenam daraji no be taji juju jina shubai sangi chudagi do. Kuna jasa da cha tashi shu de meje bo seten no go chimbe chimbe go. Kuna gombo jeje da ba je lumbo dar ba zera be da ne simje dum je la kun. Yizimze ba zerap tabal de tsinzam de be reji. 데버시바이게라 차서로 점배주노 발된도 지지 체르에서 오고 세인이 버드바 넘버세 넘게님 법바죠 건도서 무베도 지베 노보다 와르티니마이 차서레 넘도 지베게죠 전주선 바이게라 차서로 렌젠도 지지 도저보자 용 가마나 년도던다 분서 베베우 베누게세 원저로 렌젠도 지지게 저단제 주도에 와주진 거죠 그래서 템베베베 다시 한문결라 쳐서로 상바시 못되죠. 미도는 여보 요거서 파기보다 노미미상 넘대세절서. 지쇼라도 노송도 제진 비원의 추된 거든지 서숨면서. 지대교와결라 쳐서로 다자된들 저와 숨발라 게단게 워서와 군지. 되데베베 섬도이진 룩다시 데레 보숨 소 바르쇼. 좀는데 바로 공부 지진 잡아야나 차서로 관계를 미팅이 있다. 신이 되고 지진지 그도 갈번세 거다스베 서를 말하면 저거나 부지더지 연어도 연데서 루더처럼 뉴모뉴로 그러죠. 머리마세 되고 녀고 정이 조사를 좀 되는서 저서 주더도 되는서 계속 주도. 달로무시 점퍼이용다도 엄마랍잖아도 엄마랍잖아도 Ummarapazanadi, 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 Kurumda de Jajing, Petena Sheriff. Lebanze Major Majogo, Gumboja Bayana Chasa to Cosetta Bordo. Giuseppe Vardana, Gumboja Miati, Keme Parian to worship Cosetta Bordo. 중세티 버드나요 공부제 메팅이 캠베 버려 도모죠 거기서도 중세티 버드나요 공부제 메팅이 캠베 버려 도모죠 시den기 켜라부 저렇게 달로테 뭐 바랍스네 가다는 주시는 로드 법에는 와서도 시den기 켜라부 저렇게 달로테 뭐 바랍스네 가다는 주시는 로드 법에는 와서도 So today we'll be discussing on philosophy. The talk on theistic tradition and non-theistic tradition, it comes down to the whole point of discussion. It is based on the existence of ego, actually, or not, how we perceive things on different philosophical views. So, I think when we study anything, first of all, we should have an unbiased mind. That's the beginning of, like a scientific research. In this scientific research, the scientists have to have an open, unbiased mind to find discovery of what is reality. It cannot be based on taking a side or preconceived idea. You have to come with a complete open mind and then look at it from that perspective, not from one's particular background of any particular religion or philosophy. Because if you have already made your mind as a preconceived notion, then perhaps you may not be able to see clearly with clarity. So therefore, it is very important to come with an open mind and reflect on that and have discussion on that, have even philosophical, critical mind and debate on that. That's how in ancient India, in ancient India, when at the time of Buddha, there wasn't Christianity, or at that time even Islam didn't exist. But Hinduism was there in ancient India, where the notion of Atma and Anatma, or the notion of soul and no soul, those philosophical views emerge. The Hindu tradition or Vedic tradition, where there's a notion of soul, versus the Buddhist philosophy, the different school of Buddhist philosophy, such as the Buddhist philosophy of Vaibhashika, Swatantrika, mind-only school, Chitta Mantra, and Madhyamika, the middle path view. Those all different philosophical views emerge, all in the context of we may call eternalistic view or nihilistic view, or the question of whether soul exists, I exist or not. Those are very important philosophical contexts, because how we function in this world, how we perceive things, how we relate to them, are those how we see things are based on reality, or is it something we got wrong in how perceiving those things? So those questions come, then those are the philosophical critical views and debate and discussions are done like that. There wasn't at the time in India, like there were four big university, Nalanda University. It was huge. You can still see the ruins today. It was said at that time it was the biggest university in the world. There were about could be even more than 20,000 students. And the ruins, it was later destroyed by Khilji, one Muslim invader. And it was such a big academics school of, we may call university or school, doesn't matter, the thoughts or philosophies. When the Khilji attacked that, he burned the library. It took 6 months to burn all the books. It destroyed many parts of views. There were students from Central Asia. There were students from India, regardless. There were students from Greeks. And many from different parts of the world, students came. And the science of 5 different sciences, science of art, science of medicine, science of languages, science of metaphysics, logic, on mind. All those were incredible education center in Nalanda happened. So if you ever go to India and to go to a place called Bodh Gaya, it's very close to that, the place, the University of Nalanda, and still it's just like a big, big, in acre-wise, I would say like about 10, 20 acres or 30 acres of these residence, classes. All those ruins are still to this day. Anyway, the point is, those days, for example, in India, India is an amazing country in a way. It's like emerging, like we call emerging economies. Like it was emerging philosophical views where all were respected, where all were like, accepted. So it wasn't until later period uh, when Islam came to India, then there was like the Khilji, as explained, how he burnt the libraries and like that. But before, when Buddhism and Hinduism, earlier part, the early centuries, at that time, there were open debates on philosophies. So, for example, in the University of Nalanda, there is Eastern Gate, Western Gate, Southern Gate, and Northern Gate. And the Northern Gate somehow it seems to be the most important entry point where a Hindu philosopher would come and debate with the main gatekeeper. The main gatekeeper has to be one of the principal scholar. I'm sure he's not standing on a gate like we would think in a gate, but there must be some assembly hall where they come and have a debate and discussion. So the condition was whoever got defeated in the open debate, that person will surrender to the other person's view and then give up one's own view. So if the Hindu scholar, if he wins, the Buddhist will become, his follower, give up his view. And if the Buddhists become the winner, then the Hindu will. So that kind of beautiful kind of like acceptance of respect, instead of saying, I'm right and you're wrong. If you don't believe me, your head is chopped off. That didn't exist at that time. So still today, if you look at India, it's like amazing, like a belief. They call Rishi. Rishi means the one who speaks the truth. It's even that title of Rishi is given to a nihilist also. So all the different views are respected, in other words. Whether it's a nihilistic teacher, a philosopher, one who holds that view, or a Vedic tradition, or Buddhist tradition, and even today there's big Islamic, the population of India, out of over 1 billion people, almost 200 million is Islam today. 200 million. And I think about like 700 to 800 million is Hindu. And then there's a little bit of Christian and Buddhist. Now Buddhism is declining in India. It was a predominant teaching earlier, but then later, how things comes up and goes down, the cycle went down, and now today there's some revival taking place based on one of the biggest problem which I see in India is the caste system. And that's pretty, I found that very uncompassionate view on life. When you're designated that this is where you belong, the higher caste, and then the next caste, this is where you belong. And then there are 4 castes mainly: the Brahmin, then the Kshatriyas, and then the commoners, and then the Shudras, the untouchables. The Brahmins are the scholars, Kshatriyas are the rulers, and the commoners are like businessmen and commoners, and the Shudras, the untouchable. You must have heard untouchable. So these the 4 main castes, and and then they have like many subcastes among them also, So the point is, according to that custom, it's like you are designated a particular job, so to speak, and that job is not just a job, but that is your ethics, and that is your purpose of life, and that fulfilling that purpose and duty, that's how the God then designates you, whether you go to heaven or not. You see this. So if you are a Brahmin, you should just be giving the Vedic teaching and guide beings on that level. And if you're a Kshatriya, the rulers, the kings, the feudal lords, you got to make war and conquer the lands. And so that is more like your main designated job by the Almighty Creator. In the Hindu, there are like 21 creators according to the Hindu tradition. Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu, like that. So you're designated by that. And then if you are a commoner, then your work is to fulfill your common businesses or whatever. That is your duty. And by fulfilling that particular duty, that's where your moksha, your salvation, finally is achieved based on that. And then if you're a Shudra, which is the lowest caste, then your duty is to be on that level and fulfill your work, such as many like, cleaning and doing the lowest level of job. That is your duty assigned by the Almighty Creator, the Bhagwan, and by fulfilling that, that's where you gain your moksha, liberation. Moksha means liberation, salvation. So when you look at that, then from the Buddhist point of view, that's a big problem. Because first of all, it's all, according to the Buddhist teaching, all beings have basic goodness. All, which means all beings have enlightened seed, enlightened quality. And furthermore, when we look at philosophical level, we can, go through what that means according to the Buddhist tradition, basic goodness. In fact, I've spoken that in the past number of times. So those of you know, those who you don't know, then there is a whole learning and understanding what basic goodness means according to the Buddhist teaching. Meaning in some way that no being is badness. That's fundamental in Buddhism. Every being has basic goodness. And the reasons and logics are all there, what that means, that every being has basic goodness. I think from that point of view, Buddhism may be the only one which speaks about basic goodness in all being, that you can become fully enlightened Buddha. That you will not be a secondary citizen, so to speak. It's not like the Almighty's colony and you are one of those little subjects, always. So it's more like you have the full potential for realization and enlightenment. And those all qualities are all there within your mind. That's the fundamental difference of Buddhism than many other traditions. So from that point, Buddhism find that the whole caste system is people are designated to a particular state. And perhaps that it worked at one time, it didn't work perfectly. It would have never worked perfectly in the past, but it was okay, acceptable to a certain degree. Even it was painful for lower level of people. Nobody going to feel happy being on the lowest level of criteria and saying you are untouchable. Nobody's going to feel comfortable. But somehow that is the norm of the day. You have to live with that. But then later when people got educated, you begin to ask questions. In those days, education was only reserved for a higher class and privileged class like the royals and Brahmins and or to a certain extent, maybe some commoners. But the Shudras probably didn't really have that much opportunity, except for very few. So then, but somehow, the notion of there's always been war, if we know in the history of mankind, since immemorial time, there has been war. We can never say there's been no war. There's been war in India among different, even among different kingdoms of those who hold Vedic tradition. There has been war all over the world, we know, from immemorial time. But somehow, because of so many different philosophical views, has emerged in India is very tolerant from that level. Even today, India is like amazing place where so many religion exists and almost to very tolerant and peaceful. You know, there has been occasional communal problems and things like it happens everywhere, but overall acceptance. And now the caste systems, people on the lower strands of level are coming up. And it's quite challenging because something which has been instilled in the minds of whole community is very hard to get by. It's like a DNA. It's hard to get rid of that. It takes a long time and some big transformation. And so then it's, again, if you're interested in the, in some way, we are all interested in freedom. So I would never say that if you are interested, we are all interested in freedom and liberty. Like this country, is one of the most greatest country in the world. Is the freedom and liberty is part of the Constitution of the United States. For example, I learned what's the meaning of freedom of religion in America. The answer is to practice religion or not to practice religion. You have the freedom. This is great in the Constitution, that given us the free choice and the free will. In many countries, there's not, I don't think it's part of the Constitution. But somehow, those are the great things of this country. And we all aspire freedom, whether we whether we believe in any philosophical views or not, as a basic being, not only human being, but even dogs and cats, they also want happiness. They're always seeking joy, happiness, freedom. So it's fundamental. It's fundamental in all our mind, regardless of our background and whatever labels we have, Buddhist, Christian, Hindus, atheists, doesn't matter. We all seek happiness and freedom. It's simple, period. It stopped there. Now the question is, over the years, how our minds are shaped up. That's very much influence of the society and background of that, For example, in the West, there's a strong sense of Abrahamic lineage, because this is where the Judaism and Christianity and Islam, all actually the same founding fathers, so to speak, the Abrahamic lineage. And then many of the laws, from my own personal view, when I watch, many of the laws are influenced to a certain degree based on Abrahamic lineage laws, based on Judeo-Christian tradition, based on the law. Then if you look at like an Islamic country, whether they're a liberal Islamic country or whether they're a fundamental Islamic country, but there's certain influence of Islamic Sharia laws or whatever, strongly influence in the society. Then if you look at Buddhist country also strongly influenced by a principle of notion of karma and notion of compassion. Overall, it has influenced. That doesn't mean that everyone who is born in a Buddhist country practice compassion or practice respect karma. We see a lot of bad people too, or whether in Buddhist country or Christian country or Jewish country or Islamic country. There are a lot of bad people, a lot of good people we see based on personal how they view things. But overall, as a society, get influenced by those fundamental, as as it trickle down, those philosophies begin to take some part in our day-to-day life, in day-to-day how we think, day-to-day how we perceive, day-to-day what we believe ethics and not ethics, all those things are strongly influenced by that. Now in the Buddhist tradition, Buddha said, Buddhism is a religion, we can say, or Buddhism is a way of thinking, we can say. It all depends how we look at it. Definitely, Buddhism is not a religion, in a sense, a dogmatic religion. First of all, Buddha is not, he didn't claim he's the creator. In Buddhism, in fact, there is no creator. So the whole focus in the Buddhist teaching is yourself. You can create liberation or you can create the hell to yourself. So it's really your mind. In fact, so much focus is on the mind, understanding mind, whether from the philosophical level to ethical level, the karmic level, to compassionate level, the notion of emptiness in the Buddhist is all focused on this person, your mind. Because without your mind, there is no one to experience anything. Your happiness comes from the mind, and your confusion and suffering also comes from the mind. So that is fundamental understanding of how perceiving the world and understanding oneself in the Buddhist teaching. So in the Buddhist tradition and teaching, Buddha himself said that don't take my word as I said so, check it and analyze and see whether there's truth or not. So you see, when he said that, Buddhism, in the Buddhist teaching, the Buddhist school of thoughts, there are a number of Buddhist school of thoughts, such as Vaibhashika school, Swatantrika school from ancient time, mind-only school called Chitta Mantra. Chitta means mind in Sanskrit. These are Sanskrit name, Chitta Mantra. Yoga, then Madhyamika, middle path view. And within yoga, there are different levels. So all of those Buddhist school, how they perceive phenomena, and each one of those sections, how we perceive phenomena is based on the two truths, conventional truth and absolute truth, ultimate truth or conventional. This is defined in all Buddhist tradition from the very first school of thoughts and gradually developing to all level of school of thoughts. The true truths are fundamental in understanding. In other words, conventional truth means truth of appearance. And ultimate truth or absolute truth means the absolute reality. So appearance and reality, does it match? Or appearance is something else and reality is something else? That is to be discovered by those two truths. You see, this is one of the fundamental understanding of Buddhist teaching. In fact, relativity and absolute. Relativity. I think this really corresponds to, the Einstein notion of relativity. He didn't say absoluteness. He said relativity. So this is very interesting in the Buddhist philosophy. If you understand relativity, then you're really close to understanding absolute truth, relative truth and absolute truth. If you don't have an understanding of relative truth, then you miss the chance of seeing absolute truth, in other words. Because what is relative means then? The function of relative happens in interdependence. Without interdependence, there is no relativity. If it is relativity, it is a dependent phenomena. It's not an independent phenomena. No independent phenomena will be called relative, isn't it? It's only become relative when it's a dependent nature, not independent nature. Because independent means absolute, unchanging. There's no possibility of any kind of movement in absolute. So when we speak about energy, when we describe energy, it has to be a dependent nature. Dependent nature which creates the force of a particular thing is called energy. So therefore, so if it's relative, it's dependent. And what dependent is telling us? We're not talking about faith here. We are talking about observing reality. We're not talking at all faith of any kind, just what is reality. So if it is dependent, it means absence of independence. So if it's absence of independence, means phenomena, whether good phenomena, joyful phenomena, suffering phenomena, the notion of self, all these are dependent in context to one another. But itself as an independent, there is no such thing. Where there's an absence of independence. And that's what in Buddhist term, the philosophical view of emptiness comes into being. Because no independent is dependent. Now, because it's dependent, therefore is emptiness. Because it's emptiness, therefore is dependent. So, the movement of our life, the movement of our thoughts, the movement of our perceptions, and seeing perception in different angles, different contexts, is possible because it's emptiness. If the nature of the mind is not emptiness, then where is the space to accommodate different perceptions and changing? Change can only happen in a relative state. Change cannot happen in an absolute state. So the relative truth shows the nature of phenomena is empty. But it's not just mere empty nothingness. It's not like nihilistic view of nothingness. Because it's relative, therefore its essence is devoid of empty. Therefore it's possible, empty, therefore is dependent. Dependent, therefore is empty. So dependent and emptiness are one thing, like one coin of two sides. So now the notion of, when we look at the notion of eternalism, the notion of eternalism is based on independent existence, notion of self, notion of soul, notion of self or soul independent, meaning that notion of, when we talk about the real definition of soul, or Atma in Hinduism, soul in Christianity, all the rest except Buddhism, all the rest. In Buddhism doesn't believe in a soul And I will tell you gradually what makes Buddhist comes to that term. So notion of soul means which is independent from the body. Independent from the body, which is always there. And it's pretty easy to relate to that, actually. It's very easy to relate to that. Because you can say, when I was young, I was like this. When I'm old, I was like this. When I was in like graduate school, I was like this. When I was in kindergarten, I was like that. And now when I'm growing up, I was like, you see, it's very easy to relate to that, independent. But then we have to see how the I or the self, eternalistic view, theistic view, comes into being. Is the notion of self, I. In order to have the notion of I, you need something to based upon. It has to be based upon something. It's not based upon sky. Nothing is. You say I. You have the whole background of your history, your perception, your feeling, your emotion. All those things has to be there for you to come to conclusion to see why I exist. So, but when you really examine that I or the self, it has, as I said, it has to be based on something. And what is that something? That something is our five skandha, which is form, feeling, perception, impulse, consciousness. Those are the five skandha that how we, I'm John, for example, you say, I'm John, I'm Mary. There's the feeling of, so many contexts that you build upon your emotion, feeling, this, that, and it's simply based on those experience and skandha, because this, my John's body, Mary's body, and then roughly speaking, that's how, based on that, we say, I'm John, for example. Then when you really go deeper now, where is the real John? Is your finger John? Is your hand John? Is your body John? We think it's like one independent unitary at the beginning when we say I'm John, like one unitary. But then when we look deeper, when we dissect each one of those, obviously if you cut your finger and you hold and walk to the Denver street up and down, do you see John? Everyone will think you're gone crazy. You're gone mad now. We know that's just a finger. And then that finger also, if you cut into pieces, and then it become a flesh, it become a nail. And then finally you go to the fundamentals, which is objective fundamental. There's two parts of fundamental. Objective fundamental and subjective fundamental. Objective fundamental is matter. There's quantum physics theory today, science, trying to understand reality based on objective thing. So on objective level, then the starting of the whole universe, or whether it's our body, our house, mountain, trees, whatever, all this objective thing starts from an atom. And then we are trying to see fundamental atom. What is, now when we go deeper and deeper, we have to come to know what is fundamental atom. So fundamental atom, earlier there was scientists earlier thought there has to be a particle which is fundamental, and that's called God particle. There has to be a God particle which is independent. And now the scientists today cannot find God particle. And then, in fact, a few years ago, in Switzerland, underneath where they have the big scientific, I don't know what's it called, this big, yes, that particle change. then they say, oh, they were so excited finding Higgs boson particle. And Stephen Hawking said it is not possible to find something independent because, from the quantum physics theory. And I also thought it's not possible to find an independent particle. But that's also very interesting, I thought, very interesting. I'm happy they said that. Because there's two reasons. One is, first of all, of course, when they say they have found something, they have found masses of energy. Masses of energy is relative. It's not absolute, independent. It's devoid of independent. It's a relative energy. Masses, form. But at the same time, it also shows it's not nothingness. This is where now really getting close to the Buddhist view. It's not nothingness, because emptiness is based on something, is not based on nothingness. If emptiness is based on nothingness, then it's nihilism. It's very simple. Nothing exists, there is no good, there is no bad, then that is so simple. There's nothing much about that. But emptiness is so deep, the understanding of emptiness is so deep, because it's based on something. But something, what is that something? Is it independent or it is relative? So this is where, very interesting. And what it really, why we are talking about that, why Buddhism is talking about that, is because understanding the nature of mind, the nature of phenomena. Because every day to day, how we function and how we live, how our mind perceives things, how much reality is there, and how much false perception is there. It's trying to define that. That's the whole reason why, the study and reflection and meditation, all one thing at a time. The knowledge gained from hearing, knowledge gained from reflection, knowledge gained from meditation, step by step, trying to discover reality. Buddhism is not interested at all about conversion because there's nothing to convert. It is no business there. Many years ago, I met one great Lama, and he went to Morocco. He said, oh, I really enjoyed Morocco. And he was invited by the French ambassador, and he was staying with them. And one day, French ambassador host, I'm sure some some party going on. And then came, different ambassador, and also the ambassador from Vatican. So when the Vatican ambassador, I would probably think must be a cardinal, I don't know, a bishop or cardinal, whatever, someone high-ranking. And then when they met, what did he say? Exact word now I don't remember. But how is the conversion? And the Rinpoche said, I'm not in the business of conversion. So, really, neither am I. You see, we're all trying to discover what's reality, what's the nature of their mind, what's the nature of their mind. The conversion is a very simple thing. You believe in this, you don't believe, you go to hell. It comes down to that. But that is too simple, you see. So therefore, the importance of the philosophical studies and reflection, it helps us to understand how we perceive things and what's reality, so that the knowledge we gain from hearing, then not enough hearing is not enough. You need to reflect, check, analyze, like scientific mind. That's what Buddha said. Check and analyze what I said. Don't take it, I said so. That's quite something. That was quite something in those days, because every other religion said, if you don't follow my way, you go to hell. One simple thing. Buddhism, there's no such thing. Whether you go to hell or not is not God's business or not Buddha's business. It's your business. You decide where you go, not them. For example, according to Buddhist philosophy. So therefore, then the notion of self, in the Buddhist teaching, early we were talking about in the CERN in Switzerland, that they didn't find God particle as such. Neither they find the God fundamental particle in their brain, nor in the heart, nor in the physical body. There's no place that you can find such thing as God particle on the objective phenomena, objective level. Then when you now, from the Buddhist school of Vaibhashika, the first school, which is in the Hinayana level. In the Buddhist school of Vaibhashika, how they come to understanding on some kind of understanding and their level of realization coming to a conclusion of what is reality. Now again, based on relative truth and absolute truth. On that, when they look at the objective matter, they found exactly like there's no such thing as fundamental atom, because if there is an atom, then when you break that atom into so many things, finally you have to break into 10 directions. If there is an atom, there is a 10 direction, isn't it? There are 4, east, west, south, north, up, down, center, east, west, southwest, northwest. All, if there is an atom, it is in context with directions. There's no atom without direction, if there is. Now, if the atom is in context with direction, that means it's relative. It's not absolute on the level of matter. So since if it's based on 10 direction, and then when you break that up, finally you can't find any source of absoluteness, independent atom, right? It's very clear there. So then that is the ultimate nature of objective on the Vaibhashika school. That's why all matter is emptiness, coming to that by breaking that atom into its direction, and finally it is completely like you don't find any inherent independent existence there. So that is on the Vaibhashika school of finding into matter. Then now when it's come to subjective mind, Vaibhashika school of thought on the subjective mind, there's also momentariness. I don't know English word. There's, I learned my English with hippies, So I'm sorry, I didn't learn my English. I don't have much grammar thing. So excuse me if I get wrong. In Kathmandu, when I was serving my teacher with him, so I was not a good translator, but there wasn't much translator, so I would translate. Hippies it was late 70s, a lot of hippies. This is how I learned my English. I went to school. I went to Catholic school for 4 years when I was young, until fourth standard, but then that was it. Then I learned by myself. So it's not perfect. I still find discrepancy in my English language. But recently, when I went to my American naturalization exam, she said, I exempted you from language, well. I didn't have to give English tests. So then, momentariness, there's moment I'm sure there's some difference between momentariness or moment. There's different English terminology, but temporal, yeah, but momentary, like moment. So, for example, mind is, again, when we, in the context of self here, eternalism, in the context of selves where we see independent, even on the subjective level, it's all mind is like a momentariness continuum. For example, how the momentariness continuum, the mind is, like when we break that up, if you put 64 petals of flower, 64 petals of flower, and then you have on your hand, you have a needle. Snap of a finger, you can pierce through 64 petals of flower in an instant. When you pierce that 64 petal, there is momentariness, right? There's, you can't pierce the 10th or the second without piercing the first one. But it goes so fast. It's so fast, it's like in a split of a second, what we call. But there's past, present, future is happening in that momentariness. It's so fast, the speed is so fast. So like that also, if you look at the mind, on the subjective level of mind, it's just like changing momentariness, moment to moment. So how do you hold the self if it's independent? There's another thing on that level. That's on the Vibhashika school, and then on the Swatantrika school goes a little bit deeper. Then there is the mind-only school in this Buddhist school called Chitta Mantra. Mind-only school says there's no external object, but it's all like your own subjective mind's projection phenomena. That's the view of the mind-only school. You can study all these things. There's great context written on each one of the school, how they're based on finding reality of mind and objective and subjective. Mind-only schools say everything is mind. The three-world system, means you can say above the earth, below the earth, on the earth, or you can say the formless realm, the form realm, and the realm of desirium. For example, we are all in the desirium. From the lowest, the definition of desirium, from the lowest of hell realm to hungry ghost, to animals realm, to human realms, and above certain heavenly realms. The main fundamental affliction here is desire. So we are preoccupied by always with the notion of desire, wanting this, that. This desire plays a fundamental role of all emotions. Yes, we have anger, we have other things, but desire plays a fundamental role in the context of our phenomena, right, as a human being, for example, right, now we're a human being, as a human being. So therefore, all the three-world system is projection of your mind. In externally now they're going a little bit deeper. Now they're not talking about the atom and the split of a second. It's simply saying the three-world system is mind, and the example they use is dream. The dream is, is your own mind experience. But when you experience dream, you see object and you see yourself going through the whole thing. But when you wake up, you know it was not there. But at the same time, you can't say, I was just, when you're dreaming, you're going through the whole thing 100%. happiness 100%, fear 100%, joy 100%, pain 100%, burning in the fire, in your dream fire, or is no less pain than burning in a wake-up state. So everything is the only difference, how it's defined in the mindfulness school. Right now, during the daytime, is gross habit, and nighttime is subtle habits. But it's just still the mind which is projecting. And then from that point, phenomena really doesn't exist on external, it really exists on your mind. So when we really look, one of the subtle way of looking, I found this very interesting. When people fall in love, you see. When people fall in love, today, now, recently I saw in the news, now we have reached 8 billion, population has reached 8 billion. Before was 7 billion, now that's gone. Now we have reached 8 billion human beings on this planet. So out of 8 billion people, when you fall in love with somebody who you love, out of 8 billion people, only you see that person, you see the world, you see emotion, you see something unique. But not rest of the other less than 8 billion. Now you have to subtract 2 people out of 8 billion, let's say. Less 7 billion something, don't see that at all. What you see in that person and what the other person sees in you is only unique to that. So therefore, if it's really like on the objective level, if it's truly independent, then it can never change. But at some point, when it changes, where did that world go? Your whole world, we said, now I'm going through a crisis, my love life is gone and this and that. It's like you go through the crisis, that you have to go to psychiatrists, psychologists, or do all kinds of things to get back to your feet. So now what happens? So if it's really objectively real, it should never change. It is really in your mind. So on that level, one interesting thing, objective and subjective are simultaneous. Simultaneous. If they exist, they both exist. If they don't, they both don't exist then. That emotion, that feeling. Maybe the one who is still loving and the other person who want to now dissolve their relationship, there may be different, there are different feelings. But let's say one who now want to move on from the relationship, then he or she have now simultaneously both subjective and objective gone. Interesting, isn't it? And of course, there's much further view in the mind-only school. But that's how reality of phenomena. So everything is mind in the mind-only school says. Objective and subjective. So dream is one of the example how they use everything is mind. And of course, whatever we collect in our mind, our habits, at nighttime we also see those things. In daytime, we also get affected by our dreams too, And we try to learn about dreams. We try to basically learn about our emotion. So something like that. Mind-only school. And of course, there's huge study books. You can study on mind-only school. You can study on Vipassana school. You can study on Swatantrika. All about this mind. The question is, then mind-only school. Then the next stage is then the Madhyamika school. Madhyamika called the middle path school. In the middle path school, there is two schools of thoughts. One school of thought is called Yogachara Madhyamika, and one is called Prasangika Madhyamika in Sanskrit. Now, main fund Shanta Rakshita, who came to Tibet, who founded Buddhism in Tibet, the great sutra teaching, Shanta Rakshita. He was one of the principal proponent, means one who speak, right? English word proponent. Principal proponent of Yogacara Madhyamika school. And in that, what Yogacara defines, now here, the context of all Buddhist teaching is based on relative truth and absolute truth. There's two contexts. We need to understand that. So in the context of I can also say, though it's not particularly specified in Christianity, in Judaism about true truths, Hinduism has some notion of true truths, but it's like that, for example. The creator and his creation. The creation is more like relative. The creator is more like the absolute, according to the God created soul, let's say. Yeah, according to Christianity, Judaism, the God is the creator, so created soul. But then how the soul shapes in different ways is more like relative. Of course, it's not exactly, but I'm just trying to make up my own idea on that. It's not in the context of Judeo-Christian tradition, but just for example, so here in the context of relative truth and absolute truth, in the Yogacara school of thought, all relative phenomena, relative truth phenomena, is not an absolute nature, it is a seemingly phenomena. It's called seemingly phenomena. Relative is seemingly phenomena because it has no inherent existence. Therefore, like our dream, like it's seemingly, we call, wow, it's like a dream. If we say, wow, yeah, it was like a dream, means it is not real, so it was like a seemingly phenomena. That's what we meant by it was like a dream, seemingly phenomena. So according to that, relative Yogacara Madhyamika school, the relative phenomena, everything as relative exists. Of course, and we can say the cause of our relativity, different, there's good karma, good deeds, bad deeds, emotions, all coming together, it creates a particular experience, particular situation. But there's, as long as you don't analyze and you don't check, everything is okay. There is good, there is bad, they're okay, they exist. But the moment you look deeper into it, then it doesn't exist on the absolute level. It seems to exist, but actually not. Of course, why our life's changing, huh? Because it's a seemingly phenomena. If it's absolute, exists as an independent, it can never change. If it's good forever. If it's bad forever. There will be no change at all because then it's totally out of the context. So therefore, as long as you don't analyze, this world system exists, all the world system exists. Then that's exactly today quantum physics theory also coming very close to that. Quantum physics theory is saying is really like when you look in, they're only doing study on the matter. They have not reached the level of subjective understanding. That's just the beginning now, subjective understanding of mind in school. Debate, His Holiness Dalai Lama having that, inviting scientists and have discussion on mind and science convention in Dharamsala. I think it happens every 1 year or 2 years, I don't know, but something like that, discussion on that. So as long, Yogacara school of thought says, as long as things are not analyzed, not checked, things seems to exist. But the moment you analyze, then, the absolute truth is devoid of that particular phenomena. So it's coming, in other words, dependent phenomena. Our experience is dependent phenomena. For example, let me give you on a personal experience example. Let's say example. When we say angry, we think anger is something very real, independent. But when you analyze how anger came in the first place, you see how we cling to that, how we hold to that, how we grudge to that destructive force. You see, this is why we need to study, we need to reflect. So when we think of anger, we think it is by itself, there's some notion of anger by itself, independent anger. But actually, when you look at the nature of anger, it requires a subjective and an objective. And supposing when two people begin to fight, two good friends, when they were born out of the mother's womb, they didn't hate each other. In fact, they become friends. They went to school together. They shared their meals together. They went to, playing together. They have a good relationship. But then some days something, it began to happen 1 time, 2 time, 3 time. Then, first time you say, I've been patient. I also tolerate second time, third time also. Then at some point, I can't take it anymore. We say, I can't take it anymore. That means already now a number of things have built up. If things are predominant fundamentally or exist independent, the word, I can't take it anymore, will never come from your mouth. And it's just there. From the beginning, that's never the case. Then you would have said, this is how you are as always. We never say that. And then when we say, I'm sorry, and now, let me work, and then things disappears. So it shows that there is no such thing as independent emotion. Emotion is a collective of subjective, objective, many contexts coming together. Then it creates something you dislike called anger. But there's no such thing as fundamental anger. Same thing with all negative emotions or positive emotions too. Whether both positive and negative. So therefore, one of the important things when we talk about liberation in meditation, how we work, whether good thoughts come or bad thought comes, don't cling to that. Don't get attached. Allow your mind for it to come and for it to dissolve like ocean waves. The waves comes from the ocean, it will dissolve in the ocean. In fact, you don't have to do anything if you on the highest level. You try to do anything, it is a makeup. Of course, that level is a little too high right now. We have to sit a lot, and really, some pain in your knees and or whatever. But, so, it shows that, emotions, when they build up, they are like seemingly phenomena due to many subjective, objective, many contexts coming together. Then there's the emotion. Now that emotion is, also change. You're angry in the morning for a particular thing, then afternoon it disappears as something. Now, if it's really independent, it cannot disappear then. It should be there forever. There's no forgiveness. There can be no purification. There can be no liberation. The fact that we can come out of those negative states, we can come out of this fixated state because it was never fixed in the first place. It is an open mind. So therefore, understanding nature of the mind is so important for your happiness, for your liberation, for your peace. And that how first we have to hear it, then we have to reflect, then we have to meditate finally through the instruction of meditation, how to come to understanding their mind and the state of that. So now there is not much to talk about nihilism. Nihilism is pretty, denying of good and bad. But I think we should still speak about nihilistic view, because in our society today, there is danger of falling into nihilistic attitude, I think. And that is because I think today industries have, in one way, make our life much easier, and such development on the field of science. I'm not saying science is bad or wrong at all, not at all, but it has created a kind of like a comfort zone to us, the science, development of science, like our cell phone, You can just whole thing and you can talk the world, whoever you want to. You call your family, friends, just like in an instant, send a letter, do everything on that. And we become so dependent on it that we forgot to see the deeper part, that we live in a world of materialism, that we're missing to see the spiritual side of it to some extent. And because the reason is how we try, there's one thing in common. We all seek happiness. Based on that science and technology made our life comfortable, which is part of what we're seeking, happiness. But the happiness we're seeking is based on 5 sensorial level. Satisfaction, immediate satisfaction, so to speak. For the eyes, beauty. For the ears, sound. For the nose, smell. For the mouth, taste. For the body, sensation. And that's how, we see that. And we don't go anything further deeper than that. We don't seem to going into this deeper level of mind, that only when we practice level of compassion and when we practice on meditation, then we are going to the deeper level of mind. We are very much living on a world of overwhelming power of science and technology and just sensorial thing, and it just like sucks you in like a jet engine, can be so powerful that you lose your basic sanity there, and then you can have the possibility of falling into a nihilistic view. From that point of view, nihilistic view. I think that there is the danger. There's the danger of falling into nihilistic view. We don't see anything beyond 5 sense pleasure. That's all we seek. That's all to give us that momentary satisfaction, and we don't look anything deeper. And of course, world is changing. Our emotions and our aggression, our neurosis are cooking. It's boiling there. It's happening. But we're just living like a robot machine, and that's all we take refuge in, and that's all we know, and we begin to the deeper level of our consciousness, our compassion, our wisdom, we're missing to seeing that. That's where the danger of nihilistic materialism connected with that kind of view, or nihilistic view, we can fall into that. I think there is the danger of that. So you need to be careful on that. Those objective phenomena, as we have seen earlier in the Vaibhashika school, there's no such thing as fundamental particle. In fact, they are all devoid of his inner existence. So then, I think very important for us to integrate understanding and then true experience of meditation. Then we can understand how life is, our mind is. Otherwise, we can easily fall into eternalistic fixated view or nihilistic fixated view. Then we miss the whole reality in between. So, something like that. So if you have any questions, now we can have some discussions. Yes?
Do you think Trump has a little Buddhist philosophy about him?
I don't know anything Trump knows Buddhist philosophy, sorry. I have no idea what he believes. I don't know what's his religious background. I have no idea.
He creates his own reality. Based his whole 2 years on I guess sometimes he
Can you say a little louder, please? Yeah.
So just not to be, crazy, but here's somebody who has his own reality. And why do so many people, or do you believe that that is okay? The social media, whatever people say, is it okay? Because that's their reality. So where does debate come in, with Twitter and all that stuff? Do you listen to any of that stuff?
I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on social media. But I see news. Yes, I see news. So it's similar in some way. I look at, watch some different news. But you see, when we talk about reality, that's exactly what we are trying to figure out today. When we talk about, yes, for example, when we spoke about anger. We spoke about anger, and of course there's a reality at that moment when a person goes through the notion of anger and the pain of that. But when we see the anger is not somehow inherent existence, but is some collective, subjective and objective, how it relates. That's how the anger, for example, manifests. But when we begin to see that anger is something inherent reality, that's where things get wrong. So whether it's Trump or anybody, people create their own, if you use the word reality, but reality can be a completely messed up reality. You see, reality doesn't mean it's real. Reality, if it's messed up reality, the result is affliction. Anything caused by affliction brings suffering and confusion. So that's also, whether that reality is how it happened, whether that's right, is there's reality or not, that's to be found out. That's our whole discussion here today. Yeah, reality doesn't mean it is real. Reality means reality for a crazy person see things world very differently. So, but we wouldn't call that a reality. In a sense, it's right, but that's how beings go through a wrong perception. But at that moment, for example, traditional teaching explain snow, for example, snow. Snow is white, but person who is caught up in jaundice, hepatitis, will see the white snow into yellow snow. That is a reality for that person caught up with the jaundice and hepatitis, does see the white snow into yellow. And now, is that a reality, common reality? No. No one common relative reality, snow is white, snow is never yellow. But for that person caught up with the sickness, does see, does see the snow into yellow, but that's not real, even on the relative level. Let's not talk on the absolute level. Something like that. You're welcome.
So to go back to the idea of a gatekeeper and the debates on the nature of reality, when the Nalanda University was destroyed, was that tradition of debate maintained? Was the tradition of debate with the gatekeeper maintained after the destruction of Nalanda University?
Yes, to this day. If you look at today, the big, the debate in Buddhism was revived when the Mahayana tradition developed. Early in the Hinayana tradition, there wasn't much debate. So even today, like country where they follow the Theravadan tradition, such as Sri Lanka and Thailand, and there are a number of Southeast Asian countries, they don't have much debate. Mahayana school of thought was tremendous, from Nagarjuna to many great master teachers. The debate was so important. And today, like Tibetan Buddhism is like the complete context of the whole Buddhist teaching, from the Hinayana to Mahayana to Vajrayana to Mahamudra to Dzogchen teaching. There is tremendous level of debate from the Mahayana Sutra teaching. If you go to South India, where there's a major Buddhist university today, in the evening, in the morning, they have their practice, then they have their studies, like about 3, 4 in the afternoon, then the whole open space, two or three people, all scattered. Then they all debate. One will become eternalist, one will become nihilist, one will become metal. Then they debate their points and see what's truth in this. So it's very interesting. They're still continuing to this day. Very important.
Thank you for your teaching. I have a question. Because of my background and growing up in theism and that concept of the soul, and then trying to understand karma, it's hard for me to separate the idea that karma attaches to something. So I don't really understand maybe even how to ask the question, but what does karma attach to if there's no to consciousness or soul or?
No, we didn't say consciousness. That's different. Soul. We're not saying there's no consciousness. To say there's no consciousness, then there's no mind. We're not saying that. Buddhism doesn't mean there's no mind. But such as the soul as an independent state, when you look and analyze and check, it doesn't exist. That's what Buddhism is saying. But Buddhism doesn't say that as a person, as aggregates, as a person, that person doesn't exist. It's not saying that. It's relative. What it's saying is relative. And the relative means absence of independence. You see, we speak a lot about that. So it's talking about that. So to say that you don't exist at all, that's nihilistic view. But to say that you exist the way you think you exist now, that is not true. Because when you analyze, it's not like that.
But what does karma attach?
So understand, karma is attached to dualistic mind. As long as there is a, strong grasping of subjective and objective, that duality, that's the notion of that wrong perception creates the karmic phenomena, like your dream. You see all kinds of crazy things, no meaning when you wake up, but still project, and you go through that from the dualistic realm. Someone who have realized non-dual, even if they have dream, they see dream is just a dream. For example, dream yoga meditation. In dream yoga, it's very hard for beginners, but very advanced practitioner, for them, dream is just a dream. It's just an expression. They're not going to get trapped in a dream. But most ordinary people get trapped in a dream. Trapped in a dream. Why? Because of dualistic trap. That's the wrong perception of mind, ignorant of mind. Again, then when we go further, then we have to come to word ignorant. Because you see, dream is just a dream. Why are you a trap? You should ask, well, why am I trapped in that dream? Some ignorant level. Now, ignorance can be removed? Yes, it can be removed, because it's a mental state. Which is more power? Ignorance or wisdom? Wisdom is more power. His Holiness Dalai Lama used a beautiful example. He said, if one doesn't know ABCD, there is always the possibility of knowing ABCD to remove that ignorance of not knowing ABCD. I think beautiful example. There is always the opposite of knowing is more power than not knowing. So karma is attached to duality, if I use one word. Yes. Here.
Thank you, thank you, Rinpoche. My question is that if we think of, well, if the premise of Buddhism is understanding the ultimate nature of mind, and yet we always do relative practices, and we may do those relative practices sometimes with the hope that someone may have a longer life or that they may heal, things like that. How do those relative practices fit into that larger perspective or that bigger perspective?
Larger perspective. Depends on the person. Relative. Somebody's relative, maybe not much. Someone who is going through a strong sense of depression. The person who is not going through that particular depression, of course, their relative is different, right? Now, this is a very good question. It really depends on the subjective awareness. As long as you are stuck with the duality at the moment, you are stuck with the physical body, which is a byproduct. First of all, we need to check, where does the physical body comes from? Cause of physical body. This physical body, when we look at it, is a very vulnerable body for decay, impermanence, condition to sickness. Now we have COVID thing, and not only one vaccine, we have to take 2 vaccines, 3rd vaccine. In fact, it almost become like so many vaccines, and people are tired of vaccine, and now they give up, something like that. But doesn't matter. So many things one's got to deal with that. So it's like definitely the cause cannot be a perfect cause if it's vulnerable, if it's subjected to decay, subject to destruction. We can't say it is a cause of some greatness. It is a cause of some, then it's what is Buddhist notion called fundamental cause is ignorant, and affliction is due to affliction of neurosis of all kinds, deeds of all kinds, karma of all kinds. This is a byproduct of that body. At the same time, it's a great body, human body, with the human intelligence. We can understand all these things, whether it's great or not. We can overcome the shortfalls, and we can triumph from that, and we can find liberation. That is the great possibility that human being exists. In fact, human being is possibility, this body is called precious human rebirth, because even in the not according to Judeo-Christian notion of God's realm, but the God's realm according to the Buddhist tradition and the Hindu tradition, such as 33 heavenly realms, this and that, where they have amazing power of body. That's also not great over there, because the condition, they can live for like eons. But here we only live for 100 years. Maximum. There are also few people. Most people live 70, 80, 90 something years. So we have a panic. There's a blessing that panic is. I don't have much time, I better do quick. That's the panic button we have. If I have to discover something, I better do it soon, because I don't have time to live forever. And that is a great blessing. Then you begin to discover why the practice of compassion, why practice of kindness is so important instead of wasting our life in affliction and negativities. We find that completely waste of to our life to be spent in affliction is a waste of time and completely like unbelievable. Even one day going in that direction is like very, very, when you really imagine how wasteful that is. So therefore, now since we have this body, we're subjected to this, you have to work with that, this precious human body, how to maintain this. That's where like healing practice come. There's a saying, if you're killing lots of people every day, then it's better to live less. But if you're doing a lot of good things, even one day is not long enough. You should live long. You can benefit beings, you can benefit yourself. So, you have to work with this. Until this karma is not over, you have to work with your karma. You are here stuck with your karma. You've got to work with it. You've got no choice. As I said, now for example, though Buddhism talk about no self, though Buddhism talk about emptiness, no self, but at the same time Buddhism talk about self-confidence. A level, if I can use the word, maybe it's okay, but you should have the courage, like the Bodhisattva way of life. Courage to benefit being. Buddhism doesn't stay like everything is empty and now give up, you go and smoke a bhang and drink a beer and, sleep on the beach. You have to be Bodhisattva. You have to work for the benefit of being. You have to have that notion, because you have to at the same time shed your notion of duality step by step. Only that compassion and wisdom can shed that duality step by step. And then you come out of that shell. But for that, you need to be encouraged, fearless, work, practice of 6 paramita, practice of 4 immeasurable, kindness, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable equanimity, immeasurable rejoice. All those practice, you bring your courage in like that. You just don't sit and say everything is emptiness. That's bum, dharma bum. You do that, you become dharma bum. So there's the difference between dharma bum and bodhisattvas. Yeah, something like that.
Thank you, Rinpoche, for everything you brought to us. And this question is, all right. This is a question that you actually addressed and answered a good amount. Just
can you make it a little louder? Thank you.
Okay. This is a question that that you addressed just a moment ago. So you've already answered it partly, but it's something that I've wrestled with a lot of people have wrestled with. It is just the matter of work and the work ethic, and and Buddhism, and the idea, of course, we hear or consider the idea that in meditation, you're sitting and meditating and relaxing and not attending to work. And sometimes we wonder, how do we reconcile that with the need to work? And I'm not just talking about the capitalistic, like Protestant work ethic and the rat race and all that craziness, but just about the need to do what needs to be done that's always been around, and the merit of work and exertion and doing. And could you share any of your thoughts? I know this is a little vague, this question, but any of your thoughts on the idea of work and exertion versus meditation, or how the two can exist together, or
Yes, I understand
support each other.
I think I understand what you're saying. So, you see, this is exactly what I was saying. If one thinks emptiness is nothingness, there's a danger of falling into extreme. Buddhism is not talking about that. In fact, as I just mentioned, you need more confidence, you need to work with the 6 parameters. You bring that about. So, for example, then what we do in sitting practice of meditation, there's meditation and post-meditation. In practice of sitting meditation, you try to really realize the reality of the mind. By understanding and realizing, awakening into that, you will remove all ignorance and aggression and neurosis and affliction. That will happen. When that happens, then the art of life, the art of phenomena, if you want, will be wisdom and compassion art and phenomena, which will benefit yourself and benefit others. So when you say, like Buddhism talk emptiness, when that's the wrong kind of emptiness, mean nihilistic, that's not. In fact, it is said, those who view emptiness in the wrong mindset can be destroyed. So that's falling into a nihilist. We're not talking about that. In fact, it gives you more, like the great, now if I use from a very high level, Saraha, one of the greatest out of the 80 Mahasiddhas of India, he was the principal greatest. And Saraha said, when you remain in that emptiness, incredible compassion arises to being. Unwavering compassion arises to being. Because when that awareness, we are talking awareness being, seeing how, free it is. And those who don't realize how they're trapped in uncontrollable, unwavering compassion arises by seeing true emptiness. And that was my experience recently with my teacher, Soksir Rinpoche. I took him I was in Delhi, we took him to hospital, and he was physically not well. And then after he came out of hospital, his physical side not well. Then we drove around. He's been in bed for so many days. And then when we drove around and we have to stop in a car park and serve him some hot soup of his weakness. And then there was this Indian guy outside in the car park. There are many people, there are lots of bureaucrats. In India, is unlike America. In America, you don't see even, high generals and coming with flag. India, they use a lot of flag and bodyguards and this and that. And there was this person with a name tag, and he's probably a bodyguard of someone. In that park is next to the American embassy, all the embassies, and so all the important bureaucrats, and they live there. So then Rinpoche asked me, who's that person? I said, Rinpoche, he could be a driver, he could be a bodyguard of some influential person. He said, he felt so much compassion. He didn't feel compassion the person was sick. No, he's a very healthy man. In fact, Rinpoche himself is not well. That guy is perfectly strong young man. But he felt so compassion, how wandering, drifting in their mind, not able to see. He said, what a compassion, I don't know the English word, just like that how, when someone's truly realized, the sign of realization of emptiness, there's unwavering compassion and art of, wisdom and compassion arises. That's how it is. It's not like nothingness. Now you just, okay. If the sign of meditating, and if your mind get dull, if your mind get nothingness, there's something wrong in that. Yes. You're welcome.
Thank you for a beautiful teaching, Rinpoche.
You're welcome.
This doesn't have anything specifically to do with theism, but I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about how ignorance seems to self-perpetuate through fear and how to break that cycle. Because it seems that sometimes the suffering is necessary to pull people out of the fear that perpetuates their own ignorance.
Suffering is, you can say, necessary in terms of, in context of, seeing the suffering qualities when we realize the suffering is caused by affliction and ignorance. The cause of suffering is affliction and ignorance. There's no other cause to suffering. That's where it comes from ignorance and afflictions of all kinds. And when we see that, then we learn something, how to stop that cause. And by stopping the cause, then we stop suffering. That's what the Four Noble Truth teaching of Buddha is. First, Buddha said, understand suffering, recognize suffering, that we all have. Now, if there is suffering, there's a cause to that. And there's ignorance, is affliction. And that's what needs to be recognized. It's Second Noble Truth. Once we recognize that, then when you stop the cause of the suffering, then the suffering itself will stop. Then the third noble truth, cessation, liberation, does happen. So from that point of view, yes, we learn, from our suffering and others' suffering, the nature of cyclic existence. People are trapped into that. But is there why should we even go through that in the first place? You see, from that point, I wouldn't say suffering is necessary. Suffering is necessary from the terms where we are now to see that and see its cause. So something like that. So there's two angles of that. One, why even to go through that? If we don't have to go through, greatest. But then now, since we are already into it, now it's important for us to look where does suffering comes from. What's the cause of this suffering? That's the whole discussion we went through today on eternalistic, theistic tradition and non-theistic tradition, how our mind view things and to know. Yeah. Any other questions on that thing? Okay. So then, thank you very much. And this Thursday, we won't have meditation because it's Thanksgiving. So, and we will let you know when the meditation. But in the meantime, please have a wonderful Thanksgiving, all of you. And do some study. Do some study. There are three ways of studying. One is hearing, one is reflecting, one is through meditation. You gain knowledge and wisdom through meditation. You have the inner potential will come out by meditation itself. So there are three ways how you can achieve wisdom. Thank you. So let's do world peace prayer. In the world in general and in this nation, may not even the names, disease, famine, war, and suffering be heard. May virtues, qualities, and merit and prosperity greatly increase, and may continuous good fortune and sublime well-being perfectly rise. In the world in general and in this nation, may not even the names, disease, famine, war, and suffering be heard. May virtues, qualities, and merit and prosperity greatly increase, and may continuous good fortune and sublime well-being perfectly rise. In the world in general and in this nation, May not even the names, disease, famine, war, and suffering be heard. May virtues, qualities, and merit and prosperity greatly increase. And may continuous good fortune and sublime well-being perfectly. By this merit, may all beings gain omniscience, thus defeat the neurosis. The verbs of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Thank you. Thank you.